A cultural criticism of Toni Morrison's Beloved and Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, presented by Andrew Camargo, Kelsey Warfield, Maddie Holslander, and Jada Wilson. Hurston and her work. Hurston was born on January 7, 1891, in Notasulga, Alabama. She is a novelist, short story writer, folklorist, and anthropologist. She attended Howard University. In 1955, she received the Bethune-Cookman College Award for Education and Human Relations. Other works include Dust Tracks on a Road, Mules and Men, Tell My Horse, and most well-known, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston follows Janie Crawford as she faces many struggles through 3 marriages. Her first marriage was to Logan Killix, which was arranged through Janie's grandmother. In this marriage, however, Logan is very abusive. She then leaves Logan for Joe Starks. After moving to Eatonville, Florida, she soon realizes that Joe has expectations of a woman's role in life. He silences and refuses to listen to Janie's opinions. After confronting and scorning Joe for his actions, he becomes ill and is put on his deathbed. After Janie manages to see him on his deathbed, she scorns him again until he finally passes. Janie lives a happy single life after Joe passed away until she meets Tea Cake. Janie and Tea Cake are overall very happy together until a hurricane hits. Although given chances to leave, Tea Cake decides to stay and face the storm. He then gets bit by a rabid dog while she is saving Janie. Janie is then forced to shoot and kill Tea Cake due to him contracting rabies. She is then pronounced innocent after being put on trial for murdering him. Finally, after Tea Cake's funeral, she returns home to Eatonville, where she tells the story of her 3 marriages to her friend Phoebe. Morrison and her work. Born in 1931 in the Midwest, she grew up surrounded by Black culture. Other works include The Bluest Eyes, Sula, Song of Solomon, and most well-known, Beloved. The central theme of Morrison's novels is to capture the Black American experience. Her characters struggle to find themselves and their cultural identity in a white America. The novel Beloved by Toni Morrison begins almost 20 years after Seth, the protagonist, escaped from slavery. After fleeing from her old master with her children, he eventually tracks her down in Cincinnati. Instead of having her children return to a life of slavery, she chooses to kill them, but is only successful in killing her daughter, Beloved. After she was captured, Seth was saved from being killed and released after her master saw that she was no longer fit to serve him. Afterwards, she lived with her remaining children and her mother-in-law in Cincinnati, where the ghost of the dead child begins to haunt their house. Years later, 2 people come into their lives, the first being Paul D., a man who was a slave with Seth back at Sweet Home, and, like Seth, is haunted by his past. The second visitor is a girl named Beloved, who they believe is the ghost of the dead child. She seems vulnerable at first, but proves to be powerful and vicious, and her presence is destructive for Seth and Denver. Paul D. eventually leaves when he learns that Seth killed her own child, while Seth herself believes she has been given a second chance. She attempts to make amends for her past, but the ghost does not forgive Seth for her actions. Denver is forced to go to the community for help in order to make the ghost leave, but Seth's spirit is nearly broken. The novel concludes by the return of Paul D., who promises to help Seth. What is African American literature? African American literature revolves around the Black American experience and captures the essence of its culture. Qualities that are often associated with African American literature include oral forms of expression, such as Black American vernacular or speech, sacred elements, such as spiritual, gospel, sermons, or other heavy references to God, rich musical components, such as gospel, jazz, blues, and folklore. Major themes include resistance to power and human dignity. They often include slave narratives which focused on freedom and abolition of slavery. How Hurston and Morrison represent these qualities in their work. Morrison uses oral forms of expression, such as Black American vernacular speech, and sacred elements, such as spiritual and other heavy references to God, in addition to neo-slave narratives within her writing. Morrison uses Black American vernacular speech in an attempt to keep the language of her own culture. Her novels strive to preserve this language, which she believes is best sustained within the folk oral traditions. There's also heavy references to God and other sacred elements within the novel. Baby Suggs is one source of emotional and spiritual inspiration for the city's Black residents. She holds religious gatherings at a place called The Clearing, where she teaches her followers to love their voices, bodies, and minds. In addition to Baby Suggs, Stamp Paid is considered by the community to be a figure of salvation. Morrison also makes use of slave narratives in order to describe the brutality the slaves endured. Beloved explains the horrors of slavery and the slave trade through Seth's flashbacks, memories, and nightmares. Hurston also uses oral forms of expression, such as Black American vernacular speech, and sacred elements such as spiritual and other heavy references to God within her writing. She uses dialect to bring the story and the characters to life, making them seem real and believable. Their Eyes Were Watching God also explores how men and women use language differently. Men tend to dominate conversations, such as making demands and issuing orders, while women are normally forced to be silent. God also plays a significant part within the novel, but not in the traditional sense. Organized religion rarely appears in the novel. Instead, God is dispersed throughout everything. This is particularly evident in Hurston's continual personification of nature. The different elements of spirituality are often representative of Black culture in the South during this time. The feminist school of criticism. How it applies. Readers who utilize this critical lens analyze literature written by both women and men. Compare the two types of writing to see if their gender and/or culture affects the literary representation of women. Use of broad range of disciplines including history, sociology, psychology, and linguistics when formulating their thoughts. How our books compare based on our chosen school of criticism. In Beloved, Denver develops into an independent woman, showcasing her strength of character, while also providing hope for a better future, given the social tension depicted by Morrison. Touching on the point of seeing both genders as equals, the author concludes the story by having Paul D. return home to Seth and work out their pain together. The quote, "The pieces I am, she gather them and give them back to me in all the right order. It's good, you know, when you have a woman who is a friend of your mind," highlights their mutual relationship with shared mindsets and ideas. In Their Eyes Are Watching God, the comparison of roles of women and men, along with Janie Crawford's own journey of self-discovery, hint at feminism within the novel. Through her first few relationships, she is treated poorly and often regarded to as property by her husbands. By the end, however, she has found her voice in someone who respects her, Tea Cake.